Tonight I have a ghost story from Montana, based on true events. Here is the story. The house was never quiet the way new places are quiet. It has an old, quiet, heavy, layered, the kind that settles into wood and fabric and frames. When I turned the key the first time after the funeral, the front door groaned like a throat clearing. The smell hit next, lemon oil, mothballs, dust warmed by sunlight. And underneath that thin sweetness I remembered from childhood but couldn't place. I told myself I was here to sort the estate and put the place on the market. That's what the lawyer suggested, and what my mother had murmured in the car with her knuckles wide around the steering wheel. You always loved that house, she said, but you don't want to keep it, not really. My great-grandmother Etta had lived to 96. She outlasted my grandfather by 60 years. And everyone else by smaller increments, as if grief were a ladder she climbed one rung at a time. She died in her bed beneath the Virgin Mary print and the rosary tangled across the lamp. I'd loved visiting when I was little. Sugar cookies, tin trains, crinkly photos in oval frames, but I learned early that certain doors stayed shut, certain questions stayed unmasked, and certain questions stayed unasked. That was just the rule in her house, and rules were easier than explanations. The dust made halos outside of the afternoon light as I walked through the rooms. Every chair had a doily, every doily the same measured set of stitches. The clocks ticked, though no one had wound them. In the dining room, a long strip of wallpaper had bubbled up and peeled back like a blister. The patterned green vines and the ivory lilies puckered. There were no reason I could see. The realtor would hate it. The thought steadied me. I opened the window and let the autumn air push in. I spent the first night on the couch in the parlor because I hadn't changed the sheets upstairs. The house groaned and settled. Water tapped through the pipes like a hard rain. Something scratched faintly in the wall behind the bookcase, and I told myself it was mice. Around 2 in the morning, the grandfather clock chimed 13 times. I counted because I couldn't not count. I lay there afterwards with the strange certainty you get sometimes in the middle of the night. Certainty beyond logic that I shouldn't look toward the stairwell because someone would be there if I did. I looked away. It was empty. The runner on the stairs, a dark river. Morning made the house gentle again. I carried boxes up to the second floor and set them in the hallway. Fastened the portraits on the wall of the sepia family with still colors and ghost smiles. My great-grandmother at 10 in a white dress, then at 20 holding my infant grandmother, then at 80 with a mouth like a hyphen. The hallway widened near the end, where a narrow table held a vase of brittle eucalyptus, one framed photo that I had never noticed before. It was newer than the rest, color instead of sepia, and I knew the scene at once. The front yard in spring, the boxwoods clipped into neat squares, my mother and grandmother on the porch steps, but when I lifted the frame, my thumb smeared a line through the dust to the shape I hadn't seen. There in the far left, just inside the doorway, a smudge of someone pale, half-turned. It was probably a trick of light, a reflection, but the moment I saw it, the thin sweetness of the house snapped into focus. Not cookies, not flowers, powder, baby powder, talc and a ghost of rose. I put the frame down and told myself to stop being ridiculous. The bubble in the dining room wallpaper bothered me. The house had no damp smell and no watermarks, yet the paper swelled there like something underneath it was pushing out. I fetched a step stool from the pantry and a butter knife, intending only to smooth the seam. When I slid the blade beneath the paper, the sound it made was like a quiet tear, and the knife sank deeper than it should have. I pressed the wall. The wall gave. It wasn't plaster, not there. A draft whispered over my knuckles. I peeled back 6 inches, then 12, then an arm's length, and I found not drywall but a narrow seam of wood. A door set flush, painted over decades ago and papered to vanish. No handle, only a circle where one must have been. My great-grandmother had never mentioned another door. I stood there with wallpaper sagging like a shed skin and felt a hot childish pulse of anger. I'd played on this rug, colored on that table, slept in this house for summers, and here it had been all along, a door nobody told me about. I wedged the butter knife into the seam in pride. It slipped, bit my thumb. I went to the kitchen for a flathead screwdriver and a rag, wrapped my bleeding thumb, and came back before I could think about it too much. It took both hands and a foot braced against the wall to pop the catch. When it finally gave, the door swung open 2 inches and stopped. The space beyond, exhaling a breath of cold air up my wrist. I put my face to the dark and smelled old wood, iron, and that talc again, older now like the ghost of a scent. The door opened inward, only a steep stair, 5 steps down to a landing and then darkness. I turned on my phone flashlight and saw dust eddies whirl. The beam cut a chunk out of the dark and found shapes below, the curved foot of a little bed, a table with bottle shapes, the edge of a trunk, the wall. Here was original lath and plaster, supposedly torn out and replaced when central heating went in, but the vent doesn't extend into the space. No warmth had touched it in years. I told myself I'd only look, just a glance. Curiosity is a shovel. It never stops at the surface. The stairs bowed under my weight. Something skittered in the corner. My heart kicked hard enough to blur the light. At the bottom, my phone beam swung in a slow arc, and I saw the whole thing. A room no bigger than a dormitory cell. A child's iron bed with a thin mattress and a faded quilt pattern with apples. Above it, 3 crosses ranged like a constellation. On the table, a line of glass bottles, milk of magnesia, syrup of ipecac, a blue jar with dried roses. Against the far wall, a dollhouse handmade, scalloped roof, green paint, its tiny windows staring. And on the bed, propped against the pillow, a porcelain doll in a muslin dress, its hair the same shade as mine when I was 7, its eyes a flat, black green. I felt it then, something like awe braided with nausea, a room built for a child, hidden behind a papered door, not a secret reading nook, not a storm shelter, a nursery cut out of the house like a tumor. And someone had kept it, dusted the table, straightened the quilt, and reset the doll. I could see places where the dust was thinner, not recent, no footprints, no finger streaks, but not untouched for 90 years either. Hello, I said, and hated how it sounded in the air. Foolish, the word fell flat. I took a step forward. The bed, then another, until my leg bumped a low trunk. Its brass latch had no lock and shone with the full dull glow of metal that's been handed too often. Inside, neatly stacked, was folded baby clothes and a dry corsage, a book of prayers, and at the bottom a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon stiff as glass. The top letter was dated 1932. The handwriting was my great-grandmother's, looping and stern. I shut the trunk without reading, not out of respect but panic. The room had the delicate cruelty of a spider's web. I set the doll gently upright because some careful part of me believed if she fell, her porcelain would crack and something irrevocable could happen. And then I turned and hurried up the stairs, out into the dining room, where the light was sane and the world had right angles, and there were no dolls watching. I closed the door, I pressed the wallpaper back and smoothed it with my palm as if I could undo the tear by ironing the skin over it. It didn't matter, once you know a door is there, the house knows you know. The knowledge tilts the floor beneath everything. That night the clocks ticked out of rhythm. At one point 2 chimes overlapped and made a warbling note, then a voice trying to sing underwater. I pulled the old Afghan over my shoulders and told myself to go to sleep. The parlor felt colder, but I blamed the window seal. When it started, I was already half dreamy, and the sound came like a blade sliding into water. A soft lilt, a melody I didn't recognize until I did. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Not sung exactly, hummed. Woman's voice gone thin with age or distance. The melody came from the hallway and drifted down the stairs, and with it came that talc rose scent, stronger now. Not sweet anymore, but cloying. I lay absolutely still the way you would do if you know a spider is threading a line near your face. Mama's gone by your mockingbird. I sat up. The humming stopped at the bottom stair. The parlor door was a mouthful of dark. I stared long enough that patterns emerged and dissolved the coat tree, the arc of the hall, and then I saw a shape lower than a woman, narrower than a man. The shape didn't move. I turned on the lamp and the doorway was empty. In the morning I told myself I dreamed it. I drank coffee at the kitchen table until the corporate part of my brain clocked in and started making lists. Call the lawyer, call the dumpster company, call the pest control. Don't look at the wallpaper. Don't think about bottles or dolls or letters with ribbons on them. At noon the back door swung wide and banged against the stopper, though the door was calm, and I had latched it. The air smelled like the inside of a cedar chest. I went too close. I went to close it and saw pressed into the dust on the porch boards a set of small tracks. Bare feet, each toe perfect, walking in from the yard to the door. There were no tracks leading away. I cleaned the porch. I told myself the prints had been mine, distorted by light. I told myself lots of things, and none of them mattered because every time I passed the dining room, my attention snagged like thread on a nail. By afternoon I broke. The mind wants what it wants. I ripped the dangling wallpaper the rest of the way down and opened the door wide. I began to carry the contents of the hidden room upstairs one by one. Not to keep, to examine. If I dragged everything into daylight, it would shrink and lose its power. The bottles were cloudy with film. The labels turned to powder under my thumbs. The prayer book fell open to a page brittle with pressed violets. The dollhouse was heavy, its roof attached by tiny hinges. Inside each room was arranged with meticulous care pins for candlesticks, seed beads as jars, a miniature bed with a miniature quilt, a nursery within the nursery. The doll in the big bed watched me solemnly, while I pried up the dollhouse floor with a penknife and found, tucked underneath, a photograph no bigger than a postage stamp. A child with a blunt haircut and eyes so pale they barely registered, sitting in a high chair with a bib, mouth open for a spoon that a hand, Edda's hand, held out of frame. I put the photograph face down and my phone rattled on the table, an unknown number, local. I answered and heard nothing at first but the churn of static like AM radio between stations, and then a voice that might have been a girl's far away. Can I come out now? The call cut. The screen showed no record of it. The rational brain shrugs at this sort of thing. Had to be a spoof call, the more human brain that remembers the specific pitch of childhood fear quickly built a bunker. I carried the trunk to the kitchen. I made tea. I didn't drink. Then I untied the ribbon and read. Most were receipts and notes, orders for meat and coal, a morning list that read eggs 6, sugar 1 pound, Mr. Hargrave at 3 o'clock. Then the letters began, written in hand smaller than Edda's, and precise in its own way. They weren't addressed, they were diaries without dates. The writer never referred to herself by name, only I, or Mama. She never mentioned a father. I'd have kept her in the only safe place online. One line read, the house isn't safe because the world isn't safe. Men look, men take, and here she is protected from their eyes, from sickness, from sin. She is very quiet when she is good. I sing to her and she is good. Another, the doctor will not understand. He will put his hand on her and decide. He will cut, he will sew, he will do what men do. I will not let him. A mother must defend. God sees, God knows, God forgives if he must. The letters continued, and urgent and jumbled, then calm and careful, oscillating the way a fever does. Some were stained with rings like tears, or tea, or medicine. In one, she wrote, "She scratches at the door. I told her it is not allowed. The world scratches too. It will not have her." The last was written in an even smaller script, as if secrecy demanded smallness. "I have to go into town. The girl must be still. I gave her the drops from the blue bottle. She will sleep. She must sleep until I come back. I will not be gone long." There was no letter that said I came back. There was no letter that said I was too late. There was no letter that said the thing you dread. The gap was louder than words. I went to the hidden room, not with fear this time, but with fury, the temperature rise. I got down on my knees and slid my hands under the bed. I found nothing but dust and one marble. I checked the corners, the trunk lining, the dollhouse roof again. The roof was not a story, it was a crime scene without a body. My great-grandmother had stitched pity over it the way she stitched doilies, and the whole town had let her. I slept upstairs that night in my grandmother's old room because the parlor felt compromised, and because some stubborn child part of me wanted to be closer to the hidden room, not farther. I locked the bedroom door. The lock felt ceremonial. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember waking with my hand over my ears and not realizing why until I moved them and heard it. A tiny scraping in the wall, measured and regular, like a fingernail ticking down the inside of a jewelry box. Then a long drag sound. Then another scrape higher up. The scraping migrated floorboards, then the baseboard, then behind the headboard, and stopped right beside the outlet where the wallpaper didn't quite meet. I watched the scene with my whole body like an animal and whispered, "Don't." For a long time there was nothing. Then a point the size of seed appeared where the paper met the trim and the paper flexed. And a grayish fingertip, too small for an adult, pressed through the seam as if testing air, denting the paper and retreating. I left the room with the movement you make when your body moves for you, slow, careful, not turning your back on the thing you don't want to acknowledge. I sat at the top of the stairs with the hall light on, and my bare feet on the runner, and the house hummed around me with pipes and night. Eventually the tip of dawn appeared on the kitchen side of the house, and I went down and made coffee and drank it black. I called my mother. Did great-grandmother have a sister, I asked. No, she said. Why? A daughter who died. My grandmother had your grandmother, that's all. She was very private. Private, I said, and looked at the open door in the dining room and stares down into the air that had never seen day. Why are you asking? She said more sharply. What did you find? Photos. I lied. Clippings. Throw them away, she said. And the speed with which she said it was the answer I hadn't even dared to hope for. Don't start digging in there. That house does nothing to people. We're not keeping it, you know that. I said I knew. We hang up. I did not throw anything away. I did what Etta had done in one particular way. I wrote down what I could. Not bear to hold. I made a list. I titled that. Hidden room behind dining room wall. Child-sized bed dollhouse, medicine bottle, sedatives, letters implying confinement. Last letter, blue bottle, sleep, not gone long. No record of second child and family tree. Footprints on the back porch. Call. Can I come out now? And then because list making is a kind of spell that can trap the mind as easy as free it, I stopped listing and started sweeping. If a story wants to be told, it crawls out from under things. When you move them, I lifted the hallway rug and found that faint outline of a cut trapdoor long ago sealed. I tore off the dining room baseboards and found names written there in pencil, small and low, a child's height, Marianne, Etta, the letters shaky, some backward. I climbed into the attic and found a narrow cavity above the hidden room with a screen over a vent that opened into the space like an observation window. A stool sat there, a wool blanket folded on top. That afternoon, the pastor from the church where Edna had taken communion for 70 years rang the bell. He stood on the porch with his hat in his hands and peered at me over his glasses. I heard you were in, he said. Thought you might need boxes. He brought 3, which was kind. He also brought a casserole, which was kindly too. It looked that slid off my face and stuck to the space over my shoulder as if something might be peering out. Your great-grandmother, he said, was a pillar. Pillars hold up roofs, I said. They also block doorways. He laughed politely when I asked if he knew if Etta had lost a child. He twinced once, then held certain calm I recognized from hundreds of funerals. We all lose, he said. What we do with our losses is between us and God. Did anyone ever go into that room, I asked. His eyes sharpened. What room? The extra one, I said, behind the wall. Ah, he said, and set the casserole on the hall table as if setting down a heavy question. I think the best thing you can do is sell the house quick and forget it. He left without praying. The casserole smelled like ham and cloves. I didn't eat it. The house changed as the sun went down. It didn't get darker. Every house gets darker. It got attentive, like an audience taking their seats. I felt watched by the kindness that had calcified into something else, then been polished by time until shown like concern again. I carried the dollhouse to the parlor rug and set it in a square of lamplight and sat cross-legged in front of it. I didn't know what I was waiting for until the doll itself shifted. It wasn't the porcelain one that stared with its linked eyes, indifferent. It was the inch-tall figure laid in the miniature crib. It turned its head towards me and opened its mouth and didn't cry. But something changed in the air in the parlor. A pressure drop like weather turning. I reached out my finger because there is a mother shaped out of a shadow in every person. Whether or not they ever use her, and something ice-cold clamped around my first knuckle as if to pull me in. I jerked back hard enough to scoop the dollhouse. The miniature lamp inside toppled. The tiny crib rocked. My finger throbbed as frost marked circled it as if a ring had been there too long. Enough, I said out loud. Not like a prayer, like a command. Enough now. The humming started again. Not upstairs this time, but beneath the floor, directly under the rug. The same lullaby, the same careful rhythm, but slower, as if some wild rocking. I rolled the rug back. The floorboards below were smooth with use, but one had a hairline split down its center where the grain ran narrow. The split widened as I watched, or my eyes wanted it to widen. In movies, that's when the hands come out, but no hands came out, only a breath of air. And that powder rose scent in a whisper so soft I wasn't sure it was a word. Hungry. There are kinds of hungry you can satisfy and kinds you can't. I went to the kitchen because I am human and opened the refrigerator as if food would fix anything, and found the shelf bare except for eggs and a bottle of milk I bought that morning. I heated a pan, I cracked an egg, I put milk in a glass. I set the plate and the glass on the floor beside the seam in the wood, like an offering. I stood back, I waited. The milk glass didn't empty slowly, it went from full down to an inch. In time it takes to blink. The egg cooled, the smell of warm yolk filled the parlor, and moved quickly to something else, the iron tang of old blood, and I wouldn't stand that smell because it made my room tilt and a letter shout in my head. The ones about blue bottles and sleep. I grabbed the plate and knocked the glass with my elbow. Milk spread under the floorboards and the humming stopped, and the way a music box stops when the hand closes over it. Enough, I said. Again, hoarse. Stop it. Stop. I didn't realize who I was speaking to until I heard it in my own mouth, not the girl on the walls, my great-grandmother Etta, with her pens and prayers and rooms she had built for mercy and filled with harm. You keep her, I said to the house. You keep her safe. You keep her quiet. You keep her yours. I am not like you. The house let a long beam creak. The sound out timber makes when it remembers a weight. Something shifted above me, the attic stool, maybe the blanket, and an old sliding a foot from the dining room. A cool drift came from upstairs. If a house can draw itself up, it did. I didn't sleep so much as go blank. The lamp burned out at some point and the room took on that grainy film twilight does. When I woke, dawn had smeared the horizon a dirty yellow. I got my coat and my keys and I drove to the library when it opened. The librarian wore a sweater the color of unripe pears and remembered me from grade school. Family research, she asked, with librarian glee. Family research, she asked, with librarian glee. Family confession, I said, and smiled. Though she laughed, she did. She helped me pull county records and ledgers, burial logs, church letters. It took an hour to find the thing we were supposed to find. In the spring of 1932, there was an obituary in the Gazette for a beloved infant that took too soon, surname withheld at the family's request. The burial entries that same week recorded a single initial under a lot number that didn't exist anymore. The cemetery map had been redrawn when the road was widened. On the bulletin board, someone had penned a yellow calling card, hand-lettered in ink. Mrs. Edna Sim, prayer circle every 5th Sunday. Do you remember? Did my great-grandmother ever? I couldn't figure out how to ask. The librarian saved me. There were whispers, she said. There always are, but everyone loved Etta. She made funeral cakes, you know. Every time someone lost someone, she'd deliver a cake warm enough to soften the sugar. She believed in tending the morning. I thought of the letters, the prayer book, the crosses over the bed. I thought of how a person can believe in two things that cancel each other out and live at the intersection because they refuse to choose. I checked the cemetery anyway. The grass was seamed with heels like sleeping bodies, and one corner dipped where the road had bitten off a bite years ago. I stood at the dip and said nothing and left. That night the house didn't hum, it listened. You can feel when you're being watched by something that wants you to decide. I went into the dining room with the letters and the doll and the tiny photograph and laid them on the table like pieces of a chess game. My mother called and I didn't answer. My phone lit the room weakly while I held a pen and a legal pad and tried to write what happened so it would become a story and not a place I lived. My pen scrawled and stopped. I couldn't turn the thing. Under the table my shoe touched something hard. I bent and pulled out a small iron key. It had been tapped to the underside. Old cloth table brittle as onion skin. Upstairs there was nothing locked I hadn't already opened except one drawer in Etta's room. The key slid in and turned. The drawer lay a rosary, a faded ribbon, and a small blue bottle with a cork. A spoon lay beside it, tarnished with the child's name on the handle in tiny letters, Mary. The bottle held a thimble's worth of liquid, the color of glaciers. The label had worn off completely. I didn't smell it. I didn't touch the cork. I can't keep you, I said, and felt hideous because it implied someone had kept someone, and that someone had been loved in a way that meant never seen sunlight. The house, that portion of it, that was the room behind the wall. sighed as if a long game had ended. The air went still. The talc rose smelled thin to almost nothing. The thread, the echo of powdered puff. I carried the bottle to the hidden room and put it on the table. I set the doll beside it and the photograph between the doll bed. I sat on the step and spoke, not a prayer exactly, but an address to the person who had been a person, whether or not she had been given a life beyond a space the size of a bathroom. I know I said, and if I didn't, I wanted to. He left, or he died, or he never cared. You were alone, and the world is made of edges, and every edge bit you, so you built one place with no edges. You did harm and called it safety, until the words softened enough to swallow a child. If you can hear me, if anyone can, listen, I'm not boarding anything up. I'm not walling anything in. I will not be you. At some point, while I spoke, the humming started again and went almost at once to a little sighing breath like sleep. Not mine, not the houses, the rooms. Then it stopped entirely. I left the door open. I slept in the parlor with every light off. And for the first time since I opened the wall, the house held me like a thing set down carefully. Sometime in the night, a wind rose and pressed against the windows. The grandfather clock chimed the right number of hours. A train horn carried in from the tracks a mile away, and the small noises of people alive doing ordinary things finally outweighed the other kind. In the morning there were footsteps. In the morning there were footprints again on the back porch, but this time they started at the door and went out across the boards, down the steps and into the yard. All bare, all small, all ending at the edge where the grass grew thick and wet. Past that the dew was unbroken. I touched the first print with my fingertips. It was warm and dry from the sun. I could end it there. A good story knows its exit. But you'll ask if I sold the house, if I closed the wall, if I called my mother and told her we were made by women who did their best and sometimes their best made prisons. I kept the house, that's the short answer. The long answer is that I stayed for the spring and painted the porch and fixed the seal on the back door. I slept with the dining room door open or closed as it felt right. Some nights late, the parlor took on that pressure again, and I'd hear a soft rustle from the stairs, and then the edge of light, a shadow the height of a child, would stand, and then turn and go. Once in thick July, I woke to the smell of talc and rose and found on the kitchen table a smear of milk in the shape of a handprint. I wiped it up with my sleeve and whispered goodnight into a house with 100 years. When my mother finally visited, she stood in the dining room and looked at the peeled wallpaper. An open door didn't ask, which is a way of asking in my family. I told her everything, not the phone call, not the finger under the paper seam, not the milk finishing like a trick. Everything I could say without sending her away. She cried once, then didn't cry again. We ate the last of the frozen funeral cake she had brought and sat on the porch steps where the first photo had been taken. The two of us, an echo. The boxwoods were leggy. The footpath shone with moon. I used to dream, my mother said, that someone was behind the wall calling me by name I didn't recognize. What name? Mary, she said, then laughed at herself because that was the name stamped on every other Catholic thing in the house, you know. Like everything was Mary this and Mary that. We stayed until the mosquitoes drove us in. In the hall, the eucalyptus leaves on the little table shivered as if a hand had brushed them. My mother didn't notice, or did, and chose not to. I could tell you that nothing strange ever happened again, and it would be almost true. The glittering was gone from the air. The way a fever breaks and leaves behind only sweat cheeks to wash. But sometimes at night, if I turn too quickly at the top of the stairs, I catch the clean drift of powder and something else, like the breath of old flowers, and out of the corner of my eye, a small figure keeps pace with me, not asking, not pleading, simply walking as if practicing for a hallway longer than this one. If I stop, she stops. If I speak, she listens. If I sing a line of the lullaby, she doesn't hum along. The corners of the house relax, and the floorboards don't complain as much, and the clocks for a while keep perfect time. There's a patch of ground out back where nothing grows. It isn't a grave, I don't think so. It might be a place where the soil changed when the road did, or where someone once set down a heavy thing, or where a child stood very still for a long time and dew so thick it made the boards dark. In the morning sun, the patch looks like any other, which is exactly the point. The living go on. The doors we open stay open in ways that matter, and the doors we close, they stay closed even when our hands aren't on them. The hidden room is still there. I haven't walled it up, not because I like what it held, but because pretending it wasn't there is how all this started. The doll sits on the bed with her light green eyes half-lidded, and sometimes a fine skim of dust covers her, and sometimes the dust is gone, which means I should dust more often, or that the air has strange habits. The blue bottle is empty now. I poured the liquid in the sink, and the smell that rose up was not chemical but seaside, cold and vast, and for an instant the whole house leaned as if listening to a distant tide. Afterward, I labeled the bottle with a scrap of paper that says nothing, which is a lie and hope. If you ask me what was inside when I found the room, I'll say a bed, a doll, a house inside a house, a smell like powder and rose, and a shape a mother makes when she tries to keep the world away. If you ask me what is inside now, I'll say a space, a presence, a story that won't let itself be walled up. A story that won't let itself be walled up again. Sometimes late when I pass the open door, I hear the soft shifting weight on small mattress and a breath let out the way a child lets out when she falls asleep still holding a hand. There isn't any hand there except maybe there is some days when at night when the light is the color of old photographs and the lemon oil dust make the houses old quiet settle over us both. I can't keep her. I can't send her away. I can only live here with the door open and the clocks wound and the lullaby not sung unless asked. And the knowledge that if she ever needs to leave, there is a porch and steps and a yard and small footprints that show how to go. And if one night I wake up and the house is purely quiet, not old quiet, not layered, but the simple quiet of a place unobserved, and the talc rose air has blown itself out, and the patch in the grass grows green at last, then I'll know the door did what doors are supposed to do. It didn't keep, it let. Until then, I make cookies the way Eden did. I keep a little jar of sugar on the counter. When the oven timer dings, I always glance toward the dining room and say, "There are for you too." The house doesn't answer. The oven light glows gold. I set a plate on the table in the hidden room and close the door not to lock, but to let the room be a room. Sometimes in the morning there is one cookie fewer. Sometimes they are all there. A fine dust of sugar brightening the quilt and a tiny crescent bite dimpled in one that no mouse could have made. I sweep and I sing very quietly a lullaby without words. The house listens and holds and does not demand. It's the best any of us can ask. Did you find that creepy? If you did, like and subscribe. Have a scary night and spooky nightmares.